Want to talk about the quick background of the building?
Oh, and our building was, the concept for it was started in the 1920s by some history professors. They thought that students should be able to see primary sources from Kentucky. And primary sources are those first-hand accounts of things. And these students started bringing things in. And some of the professors actually offered extra credit if they would bring in a book or a newspaper or an old family Bible or letters from their family. That began to accumulate to the point that they finally dedicated a part of a floor in the new library, which is now Gordon Wilson Hall. That was the library at one time, for this Kentucky collection. And then one of the professors actually persuaded Dr. Cherry into pursuing an idea, which he called a dream, to construct a building that you would be able to walk through and know Kentucky. That's the way he put it. And so through fundraising, the money for this building was all public funds from individuals and groups. It was not finished though. It started in 1929. It wasn't finished until 1939. Why? 1929 to 1939. Yeah, the Great Depression happens. We just economically couldn't do it. And so it was finally finished in 1939 and open. The biggest question we always get about the building is, they'll say this old Southern plantation house, which I don't get from the front of our building, but that's what they seem to think it is. And they'll say, what was it? Well, it's always been the Kentucky Museum and Library. So we've been here for now 80 years. And we've been collecting all these types of things. In the library, we chiefly are collecting either secondary sources, which is what you're used to, books. Somebody's taken all this information, synthesized it, and they've written a history. So that's their book. But the thing we really want to try to collect are primary sources, actual things from the time periods. And so that's one of the great things about you coming, is we're going to show you these are printed secondary sources, but they're from the time period. There's a couple of reproductions, and I'll point some of those out as we go through. So, and the reason we're having you stand for the library portion is, most of our things are one-dimensional. They're flat. Whereas Sandy's things are three-dimensional, they're artifacts, and she's able to hold those up better. But for you to be able to do this and see it and observe it, you need to stand for this side, okay? So on this side of the table, I have pulled out some sheet music. Probably none of you have even used sheet music unless you are in a choir or played in a band. But even the sheet music that you use for those are generally not like these. They don't have these beautiful covers on the front that were part of the appeal of buying them. All of these are from World War I, and I could probably pull at least 30 or 40 more examples from World War I of sheet music. But if you came in and you asked me to pull a piece of sheet music related to World War II, I couldn't pull a single piece for you. I don't think. We might have one or two. What is the difference between World War I, with all this sheet music that you'd sit around the piano and play and you'd sing along with the piano player, and World War II, it just practically doesn't exist? What changed? I mean, to me, this is a real live situation from life. What happened in those years that would cause all of this wonderful sheet music, and then 20 years later, there's none of it? Anybody want to guess? I'll give you a hint. It's technology. I heard something back here.
Phonograph.
Okay, there is the phonograph. Now the phonograph is a little bit earlier. That is true. But something that was even more universally available. The radio, that technology changed this. No longer in World War II where you're going to be sitting around singing piano songs with each other. You were listening to it on the radio, and by the way, they probably sounded better on the radio than you did sitting around playing it and singing. There are basically two themes to the covers. One is going to be military, we're supportive of the military, or it's going to be very sentimental. So in this case, this is a little bit of both. This is one of the more popular songs that came out during World War I. Over there, it's by George Cohan, very famous composer and lyricist. And the other reason we really like this particular one, although it's not in the best of shape, is the fact that this is a Norman Rockwell painting illustrating it on the front. So this is more of the military. You see the guys around the campfire, the doughboys as they were called. And then you get one like this, that even though it has a soldier on it, this is the more sentimental. Because, okay, tell them who he's thinking about.
Is that a woman?
It's a woman.
I don't know.
Okay, look at her. Is she a young, beautiful babe? No. So who do you think she is?
Mom?
She's mom, absolutely. That is mom. And you can see she's sort of in there like in his dream state. He's thinking about mom and home, of course. Okay, so, okay, this one. Is this military or sentimental? Sentimental, yeah. Obviously this guy has a stutter. Katie, this was a very popular song also. So this tells us something about what's going on. Anybody notice something about the colors? It's not the bright color palette that we have today, right? But do you notice something about the color? Do you see similar colors? What are they? Blue,
Orange.
orange. I'm glad you said that because that's supposed to be red, but it is cheaper to print with the orange than it is with the blue. So the color palette's a little bit different than what we think. It's not that it's aged or anything like that. It's just a more orangey color than red. Now this even looks orange, but you obviously know that's red, white, and blue. Now another technology in a time period that had not developed in the United States well was something called chromolithography. It's a complicated printing process which allows you to print in 4 colors. And so one of the popular things that was printed in that process were postcards. And we have some beautiful postcards from pre-World War I. But they're all printed in, I shouldn't say all, but I would venture to guess 75 to 80% of them are printed. People are sending lots of postcards, something that had started in the 1870s and had developed over the years. But by World War I, are we going to be buying postcards from Germany during World War I? Obviously not. So fortunately for the United States, this printing process then migrates to the United States and we begin to develop that more seriously. So this is a particular family here in Kentucky that had 6 sons serving in the military. And you can tell by their uniforms that they're in different branches of the military. Sandy's going to tell you a fascinating story about that broadside that's right in front of Victoria there later on. So keep that in mind. These postcards could be printed like this, thousands and thousands of them, or
Can I ask you to tell them about that caption underneath that last one you just showed?
Yes.
Who it's aimed at?
I'm going to read it to you. We've still yet to figure out exactly what this means, but it says, personally obnoxious. To the Kaiser, well of course, these guys are going to be obnoxious to the Kaiser, right? To the Crown Prince, and to Mr. Beckham of Kentucky. This is what we don't understand.
J.C.W. Beckham.
Well, we do, but we don't understand why he's obnoxious to these gentlemen.
Maybe he was anti-war, I don't know.
Well, it's possible, because there was a peace movement in World War I, so that is possible. But it says, Ben Marshall of Frankfort, Kentucky, and 5 sons who volunteered, the youngest under 17, the oldest over 30. Then again, okay, who's he thinking about? Yeah, it's definitely mom. She said she guessed dad first. But you see there's a little halo up here around the mother. But this is called a real photo postcard. You could take a photograph of yourself and take it to the developer, and you'd have 50 of these printed out. And on the back, he would print an indicia for a postcard on the back. So these are called real photo postcards. One of these, this gentleman, we actually know who it is. A lot of them are not identified. This happens with a lot of photographs. But this is Harry Gilpin. He's actually from this county. And he lived through the war and came back. But This is a wonderful photograph with a flag in the background. We actually used this for a poster for an exhibit that we did, and an artist was able to go back in the background and paint the flag red, white, and blue, so it made a really nice image. And speaking of images, this is what we call in library land a broadside. So it's a one-sided printed piece. And these were very patriotic. They were meant to hang on the wall. If you had a son serving or you were supporting the war, then you would hang these on your wall. As a matter of fact, one of my colleagues said she remembered in one of the Andy Griffin shows that this was actually hanging on the wall. Was it at the jail or in their home? At the jail. But they tried to incorporate as many patriotic elements as possible. So what do you see? What's one of them? What's one of them? What's patriotic here?
The eagle.
The eagle, absolutely. What else? The flag. And then you're going to select the most well-known presidents. Of course, Woodrow Wilson, who's serving as president at the time. And then the most important presidents in our past, it's still in all the polls, they come up at the top. George Washington, father of our country, and Abraham Lincoln over here. And of course, down at the bottom, America, we love you, the brave boys of 1917. By the way, when this came in, I think you can tell it was in a frame. And what was on the back of it? Anybody can tell what this is? It's wallpaper, yeah. We were able to remove most of it. You see how they glued it on, and then we were able to repair the piece. And that's why we put these things in plastic. We can touch them. We can move them around. I mean, I'm not going to bend this in half, but we can move it around and it's not going to hurt the original. And it's actually static cling is what holds that in place inside. Okay, then down here, it's actually some primary source. These are still printed. Many of these were printed, but a couple of these items are actually primary sources. So if you were a man and you were serving, maybe you are from the backwoods of Kentucky, you enlist, and so you began to start creating documents about yourself that maybe had never existed before because you're now in the military. So first of all, you're going to have a military ID. If you came over and looked at this, all you're going to see is his picture, his type name, and his signature. There's no social security number here. Why? This is 1918. There's no social security until the 1940s. So it does say what infantry unit he's in, but that's it. It's all that would be on your military ID. If you're from the backwoods of Kentucky, maybe you've never heard about things that can happen to you if you participate in extracurricular activities. So I know this is covered up. That's not general diseases. What is it going to be about? Venereal diseases. Some of these people have never heard of these types of things, gonorrhea or syphilis. And so this little pamphlet would be given to you. It's marked on the front, 1917. It explains a little bit about if you participate, if you pay your money, take your chances. Basically is what it's saying. Now here's a little tiny piece that was given to some men. It's called Poison Bullets. Now what in the world do you think they're talking about? Poison bullets. Obviously warning them about something. Smoking cigarettes are poison bullets, so stay away from them. I like to have this out because a lot of people don't realize how important Kentucky was in World War I. This is an accordion postcard set. You know, if I pull this out, it would just drop down and there'd be all these images of Camp Zachary Taylor, which was in Louisville. And Camp Zachary Taylor was the second largest military base in the United States at the time. All these men came through here. And it's a fascinating microcosm of what was happening during World War I. Because along with military service, all those men getting together, we hear about the 1918 flu pandemic. And it just spread through this place like crazy when it happened. And another thing that Kentucky was well known for is, I mean, we're well known for horses, right? But I'm going to tell you, for World War I, something more important that's alive is more important than a horse. And we wanted mules. I mean, we were still not a fully mechanized army yet, and we still use mules and horses, but mules were really important for helping pull equipment. And so Kentucky and Tennessee were famous for their mules, breeding them. And so they definitely came to Kentucky, especially to Simpson County, which was one of the top mule raising counties in the country, to get horsepower and mule power. One thing that gets printed a lot in every war, I don't care what war it is, are insignias, so that people can tell if they are soldiers sending them photographs or pictures from things. What do all of these things mean? The other thing that gets printed during wars always are maps, because people need to know where these things are and who they are. And so we brought out one map over here from Verdun. It's a very detailed map. You're going to have time at the very end of class to come over and look at these things. I encourage you to look at that map because it is very detailed. I'm gonna move along quick here. I just want to tell you about two people's stories really quick. One is this gentleman right here on the right-hand side. By the way, this Saturday, this gentleman is going to be inducted into the Kentucky Aviator Hall of Fame. He is Victor Strong. He's from Bowling Green, Kentucky. His father was the head of the music department here at Western at the time the war started. They were German immigrants, the father and mother. And so that put a little extra swing on the story, because here the father at first supported the German war effort, but he eventually quickly changes his mind. And so his son is in service in World War I. He's one of only 3 flying aces from Kentucky. That meant that you had 5 documented kills during the war, and they had to be documented by someone else. You couldn't do it yourself. Here he is in his Samson airplane, one of the airfields in France. If y'all are fans of Snoopy, and we're fortunate we have about 50 of his letters from World War I and a World War II diary that he kept, because he stays in the military, and by World War II he helps plan D-Day. He's with all the generals who are planning D-Day. He helps with the logistics. But here's a letter that he writes to his mom in September of 1918. Tonight, I think this is indicative of the type of letters that most people get back home. Tonight it is 1 year since I was last home, and it has certainly been a long one. 1 year ago tonight, I was at home for the Fair Hawk, which was the big social event of the year here during the county fair. And it was such a wonderful visit. And believe me, would give most anything could I be there tonight. My flight is in wonderful shape now, and everything is going good. Weather permitting, I go out at 3:30 a.m. every day, because he's taking reconnaissance photographs. That's why he's flying 40 miles behind the line. He's taking reconnaissance photographs. Wonderful letters, but they're just like all the other letters we have. Thousands and thousands of them here. What is a soldier going to be writing home to his mom, his girlfriend, or his children? And what is he going to tell them?
Good things.
Okay, good things. I'm safe. I've got plenty to eat. Don't worry about me. And then he's going to tell them how bored he is, because that's the way it is in the military. It's hurry up and wait kind of situation, right? Right, Christy? And then one other really nice primary source from World War I, and quite honestly, I don't know why we have this or how we got it. This is a check-in book for a YMCA in Reims, France during World War I. It's for 1918 and 1919. The person would sign in. It would give his outfit and then where he was from, and then comments. And some of the comments are interesting. Like on this page, we had somebody from Georgia, Texas, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, someplace that I can't read, Arkansas, Pennsylvania, and so on. And over here, just left England, waiting to go home. Again, waiting, that process of waiting. Going to stay in France for another year. Wow, somebody's studying abroad already. Don't want to go home. Now that is the exact opposite of most sentiments in here. They're all saying, I want to go home, and then there'll be ditto, 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 ditto marks. This guy's saying, I want to stay here for a while. So again, this actually from a YMCA there, a primary source. These are actually the people that were there and signing this. The YMCA was a gathering place for you to have refreshments, but also one of the big things they did is they sponsored dances where they would encourage young ladies from the community to come in and have dances. Now, I've been talking only about men. There were women who served in World War I. And this postcard here is 3 women in different uniforms. What do you guess are going to be the things that women are going to do in World War I? They're not going to be on the combat front. What are they going to do? Two main things. Nurses, that's absolutely right. The other is also medical related. Lots of the suffragists later on in that decade are going to be able to say, during World War I was an ambulance driver. They were given a lot of independence and freedom, and they drove them just as good as a man could do, but the men were needed at the front, so the ladies stayed behind and drove the ambulances, bringing the bodies back, and sometimes casualties, back to the hospitals. Okay, now see, you're going to get an opportunity to sit down, and Sandy's going to talk about World War I artifacts.
Okay, if y'all want to just find some chairs.
Around the room are propaganda posters from World War II. We have about, I'm guessing 50 all together in the collection. Some of them were already in the collection. A few of them we purchased, but almost all of them came from the Warren County government. These would be sent to post offices and courthouses to be hung up. I guess they did hang some of them up, but the rest of them they kept in their original envelopes because all of these were folded. You can see the fold lines in them. That's how they were shipped to these different places. And they just stored them up in the attic of the courthouse. And so around sometime in the 1980s, somebody from the courthouse said, do you want these? And of course they said yes, because they're beautiful iconography. They're all produced by the Office of War Information. If some of you eventually, if you take more history classes and you want to do a great paper, that would be an ideal kind of paper to look at the Office of War Information, how they hired artists and script writers to help produce these posters and snippets for radio. I think you would find it really, really interesting. And somebody was really interested in this in the earlier class, to compare propaganda from World War I with World War II. And it is decidedly different. But they're great posters. Some of them for the home front specifically, like this one on the left here, save things like even bacon grease that you would have left over after a meal. Save that with any other greases that you collect and take that in, you would turn that in, and it was used to make bombs, believe it or not. So you've got a more positive propaganda, and then you've got the negative propaganda. So this is of course against the Nazis, and of course what they're portraying here is that the Nazis are against religion, particularly Christianity, and so the knife is through the Bible there. And then you get something like this. Again, this is for the home front. This is what we should do is, we can do less, we'll ration out, we'll sacrifice so that the men can have what they need. And that's the theme of many, many of the propaganda posters throughout our collection. By the way, you can find these anywhere. Well, I should say that they're rather expensive today, but collections around the country have these because they produce thousands and thousands of them. And you'll find a lot of them online, but here you see the actual things. I wanted to share a couple of really odd propaganda items with you, and then share with you just a couple of manuscript collections so you can see the types of letters that some of the men wrote back. But I have, first of all, an interesting piece. Obviously you can tell this is an American flag on the front of this. This is actually printed on silk, and it has 7 different languages down here at the bottom, a message. These were kept by paratroopers in particular, but other service members held these too. They would be folded up and kept in the pockets, sometimes in your parachute. or sometimes on your body, so that if paratroopers were particularly, this could happen to them, they could get separated from their unit. Like the breeze would carry them afar from their unit. And so they could pull this out of their pocket, show it to someone, and immediately, almost everyone would know what an American flag is. And then in one of the language down here, it would say, I'm an American, I'm separated from my unit, can you help me get back to it? Obviously, none of the interpretations down here are in what languages? There's 7 down here, but there are not going to be any German down here. And there's not going to be any Japanese down here. These are allies, so there's French, and then many Asian languages, Chinese, Korean, Laotian, etc. It's an odd thing, isn't it? You don't even think about this, but this was something it was really important when you need it. It's like toilet paper. When you need it, you need it. And so here was something that they just kept on their bodies just in case they ever got separated. Were these ever used? Absolutely. And then this is not even subliminal propaganda. I mean, they make it very clear what they're trying to do here. So on the front of this is a dead man with his mouth open. And the text up here reads, the Yanks are lease lending your women. Lease lending your women. Their pockets full of cash and no work to do. The boys from overseas are having the time of their lives in merry old England. So immediately we know who they're trying to put this propaganda on, to the English. Then it reads, and what young woman, single or married, could resist such a handsome brute from the wide open spaces to have dinner with, a cocktail at some nightclub, and afterwards, ... I think you can read between the dots, right? Anyway, so numerous have become the scandals that all of England is talking about them now. So obviously this is propaganda meant for the English soldiers in particular. Who's putting this out? Who's distributing this to the English? Is it Americans? Now I know y'all are logical enough to say at least it's not the Americans, right? Because that's who it's propaganding against. Here are these Americans over here then leasing your women. Okay, tell them what's on the back.
Quality of life.
That's not what I want you to tell them.
It's a naked woman.
With
soldiers. A U.S. soldier.
A naked woman with a U.S. soldier obviously putting his clothes on after he's been leasing with this young lady. How do you think the Germans got this to the English? Did they mail it to them? Was it some mass mailing? No, how did they get it to them? They airdropped them, that's absolutely right. This is one of the most popular ways to drop propaganda anywhere during World War II is to air just leaflets flying around. As they're bombing across London, they're dropping these flyers at the same time, saying you can't trust the Americans. Now let's go to the other theater of the war, to Japan. This is a lot smaller, but this is obviously not an Asian woman, is it? No, she's got her beret on, she's got a lot of heavy lipstick on, and what you can't see, but subliminally is in this, on this side where the writing is, there are skulls in the background. And this is not politically correct, by the way. The other class kind of gasped when I read this. Please, please come back, she's saying. Don't die, it's terrible to be dead. We need each other. It would be awful if you're crippled. I wouldn't know what to do. See, it's not politically correct, right? You turn it over, and here's what it tells you. Here's all you do, it says in all caps. Number 1, come towards our lines waving a white flag. Number 2, strap your gun over your left shoulder with the muzzle down. 3, show this ticket to the sentry or the guard. And 4, any number of you may surrender with this one ticket. Then in bold letters again, the Japanese Army headquarters. Now, Christy, what do you think really would happen if you surrendered to the Japanese during World War II?
Shot.
You got shot. So, I don't know, I don't think very many men took it up, but this is again propaganda that was distributed. This wasn't distributed by the English or the French. The Japanese distributed these in hopes that men would surrender. Now, just a couple of stories from World War II. And again, when we're done, you're going to have an opportunity to come back here and I'll explain a few things that I won't show you that you might want to look at. This is a series of letters by Harry Jackson. He was from Bowling Green, Kentucky. He was a very talented person and he served in the Special Forces. Not the Special Forces like we think of, but Special Forces as in creating entertainment venues for soldiers. So he did sports, he did entertainers, dances, that type of thing. He had a really good job, quite frankly. But he told his family back here in Bowling Green, you gotta keep in mind this is World War II. A lot of these people have never traveled before. Maybe they had seen postcards and pictures. He says, I'm gonna be your eyes. And on his letters, he draws chateaus and cathedrals that he sees. And common things like what we would call folklore. Here he's saying this is the back of the neck, you know, the way, the clothing that the peasants wear in the area that I am right now. The types of shoes that they wear. Beautiful cathedral, a Nazi insignia of some sort. A chateau, which I really like. He's drawn a vehicle down here, and on the vehicle it says Bigfoot. Well, you know what we think of when we think of Bigfoot, right? Sasquatch, that's what we think of. But he includes in here some information that it's called this because the guys had such a hard time finding me a pair of shoes. So Bigfoot. And then on the back, here are Americans in automated vehicles, but people locally are still riding in wagons like this. A great collection. He goes on to become an entrepreneur, an art collector. One of the larger collections in the museum is art that he collected. Was a very, very interesting person. By the way, he also collected manuscript material. And one of the things he brought back, traveled all over the world. He brought back in Russian things related to the court case against the killers of the Romanovs, which we have upstairs. We sent the originals to Columbia University because they have a Russian studies program there, which we don't here, but we kept a photocopy here of it. And then another story that relates to faculty. You know, these wars, they call world wars for a reason. They affected everybody, including people here at Western. And so this is a series of letters. There are over 1,000 letters in this collection written to a professor here at the university. This was Frances Richards. She's the one who started the College Heights Herald and the Talisman. And so she's a journalism English professor. And people really liked her because she worked one-on-one with students. It wasn't just standing in front of a classroom lecturing. She worked one-on-one with them. And so she had many people who wrote to her, including future professors like Lowell Harrison, who taught history here. He was one of her students, and he wrote back to her. And then people, this is just a series of 6 letters. They don't say a whole lot. He says, I'm sending you some money because I want you to send some College Heights Herald to me. Even though he's across the world, he wants to know about what's happening back home. Interestingly, these are signed by Julian Goodman, who is going to become the president of CBS. I mean, I know we think we're Western Kentucky and we're out in the woods. People you'd be surprised at some of the graduates of Western and what's happened with them over the years. But here's the future president of CBS who's writing back to one of his professors. I had one of the students in the first class really question me about this. This is an enrollment sheet for a soldier who's being brought into a German prison camp. But it's called a Stabluft. So Luft. Anybody familiar with the German military? Luft would be, maybe you've heard of the Luftwaffe. That's their Air Force. So this Stalag is prison. So this is a prison camp for airmen. And of course, we didn't have an Air Force, but that was part of the Army at that time. But look at all of the detailed information: height, weight, where he's from, his rank, how tall he is, his language, his color. Of course, everything's in metric for the weights. Pictures of him, fingerprints. Why in the world, for a prisoner of war, would they be keeping like such detailed records? It was really important for prisoner exchanges. This documentation was, they needed to know who they had because it gave them a negotiating tool to negotiate with the other side if they were to have a prisoner exchange. And let's face it, pilots were important, and they were really important to the Germans. So this was information that was kept in this great a detail. When you get up later on and are able to go around the room, what do we have here for you? Yeah, these are photographs from the Holocaust, from one of the concentration camps. If any of you are doubtful about whether there really was a Holocaust, there's tons of documentation about it. So, and here's just from a soldier. This is not propaganda here. This is just a soldier taking photographs when he is going into a concentration camp and helping free the people that are still there. And the evidence that they find when they get there. Okay? So that's for you to come back and look at later on. All right, Sandy, back to you.
Okay, if you all want to come back and have a seat.